In this tutorial, you'll see how to enter data into SPSS. SPSS stands for software package for social science, and as the name implies, it is used mainly for data analysis in social sciences like marketing, management, HR, and so on. Especially if you are analyzing customer data based on survey data and based on questionnaire, SPSS is probably the best tool to use. It is a professional software, very sophisticated, with very capable software, which of course comes with a price. SPSS can do a variety of things. Here under the Analyze menu is where is everything which SPSS can do. In our class we will cover just a few of its capabilities and options, but overall it's a very powerful tool. For example, it even can run neural network, it can run multivariate analysis, it can run forecasting, time series, and so on. But the purpose of today's this tutorial is to demonstrate how to enter data in SPSS. This is how SPSS, an empty file in SPSS looks like. You have a data view, there is the data view here, and there also is the variable view where the variables are described. The file is empty. SPSS can read variety of file formats. Probably the easiest way to start using it is to just enter the data you need. Let's say, for example, I want to create a very simple file, and I start with entering the names of the variables and their description. For example, let's say my first variable is gender. My second variable, and when a variable is created, it suggests several properties of this variable, which later can be changed if desired. Another variable can be, for example, income, and that's it. So let's assume our simple file consists of only these two variables. So for every response, we'll record the gender of the respondent and its income. The names of the variables may not be quite informative, and for that purpose you can enter a description under label. For example, I'm going to repeat here, for example, gender, and here I'm going to repeat income, and I'm just gonna say put label here so that it's different from the name of the variable. I'm gonna do the same here, label, just to demonstrate that how labels are displayed in in the results. So with that said, when we click on the data view, we see that the two variables now appear and we can start entering data. First, let's define, we can skip this part, but it's very useful. Let's define the values of our variables. For example, when we enter gender, we need some preliminary coding of gender. So let's say, this is the place, by the way, where you enter those initial labels and what the numbers correspond to. So we click this small button here, and now we can tell SPSS we're going to enter 1, which in our data case will correspond to males or male, and add, and we can enter 2, which will correspond to female. Now SPSS knows, and this will appear in the output, which is very useful, that when we have 1 it corresponds to male, and when we have 2 it corresponds to female. When we click OK, we see that those labels actually appear. When we click on data view, we can start entering data. For example, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, etc. We of course can enter a different label, but it's not going to be right, and the SPSS won't know the meaning of 3 and 4 because we entered only the meaning of 1 and 2. So I'm going to delete it. For income, we did not specify what it means, but let's assume it's just the yearly income, and let's say it can be 30,000. It can be 40,000, and so on. So this is how we enter data, and again in our variable view is how the variables appear. So if we want to enter data manually, which happens more than often, this is how we do it. Another way to enter data is to import a file. And in a moment we are going to import data from Excel file, which was readily available before we started. So I'm going to delete these two variables right now. It happens when you right click and then simply select clear. So the gender variable is gone. Or you can go to the variable view and do the same thing, right click here over one and select clear, and the variables are gone. Now SPSS is empty again. Now let's import data from Excel. Click open. You find the location of your file, and by default SPSS searches for SPSS data, SPSS files which have extension SAV, so we need to change it to Excel data. And I'm going to import data from our practice 1. When I click open, SPSS asks from which spreadsheet to import the data. I know, because I entered the data, I know that it's in the first spreadsheet, so our data is in the first spreadsheet. If I select spreadsheet 2, nothing's going to happen because it's empty. The data which I want to import is in sheet 1. So I clicked here to read the variable names from the first row. Click OK. And this is our data. This is the same data which we use in our practice. So we see gender, familiarity with the internet, weekly usage in hours, and attitude toward the internet. Because the names may not be informative, I'm gonna write more informative labels. For example, gender is gender. Familiarity is internet. Weekly usage in hours is hours per week. And attitude toward the internet is internet. Now we have our labels, and it will be much easier to understand the output with those labels instead of just looking at the names. If we want to specify the values of those the numbers or the labels in our variables, we again click values, and for gender, in our particular data set, I know that 1 corresponds to male, add, and I also know that 2 corresponds to female, add. Okay, and now SPSS also knows that 1 and 2 correspond to male and female. Familiarity, again we have, this is a question ranging from 1 to 7. We can enter any number of labels we want. I'm going to define just 3, for example. 1 is not familiar. I'm going to define 4, which is right in the middle of the scale, as neutral, and I'm going to define 7 as very familiar. Actually, when I think about it, 4 is not neutral. It's more like somewhat familiar. So let me do that. I'm going to delete it. I'm going to enter again 4 as somewhat familiar. And of course we have 2 and 3 and 5 and 6, which indicate different states, different levels of familiarity, and we also can assign names to them. When we click OK, they appear in values. As said before, hours, there is no need to define hours because these are real numbers. And attitude is attitude toward the internet, also ranging from 1 to 7. So I'm going to define in this case only 1, as my attitude would be very negative if I clicked 1, or the other way around. If I clicked very negative, it will be labeled with 1. And if I clicked 7, or 7 will correspond to very positive. So we define the ends of the scale. We're ready to go. The data is entered, and we know the labels and the meaning of the values in those variables. We can save it. For example, we can write internet. I can call it internet, and by default it will be saved as an SPSS file. So with the data entered, we're ready to do some basic analysis. All functions, almost everything that SPSS can do is under the Analyze menu. Of course, there are other menus here. Transform, this is when we want to transform one variable into another. We can do some data manipulations, but there will be separate tutorials for those. Let's focus on how to run descriptives. And descriptives is the same as summarization, or summarizing, calculating the averages and the proportions for the variables in the particular sample. So if I want to see the proportion of males and females in my gender variable, I need to go to descriptives and select frequencies. Frequencies calculates proportions. In SPSS it's called frequencies. Frequencies are applied mainly for categorical variables. So when I click frequencies, I can select gender. And by the way, a nice feature of SPSS is that you can resize the dialog boxes. Now I would like to know the frequencies or the proportions of the different genders. We have some other options. For example, I can request from the bottom chart, from charts, I can request pie chart. And let's say I would like to see the percentages, not the actual counts. I can request variety of statistics, which we're not going to focus exactly on right now, but for example, if it was a metric variable, I could calculate its mean, and of course I can calculate the mode and for categorical variable, and variety of other statistics. So I'm going to click OK, and SPSS is going to display the proportions for males and females along with a pie chart. The first table gives us a quick description of our data. We see that we have 30 valid observations. From them, males, we have 15 males, which corresponds to 37%, and 50% corresponding to valid percent. Okay, we have something called 10 missing. Let me see where they come from. I'll be curious because I didn't plan to see those 10 missing, but it's a good case to examine. So right now, for gender, I have male, female, and missing. Now I'm really curious what these missing are actually. Oh, okay. Looks like when SPSS was in the Excel file, it entered some empty cells were imported as well. You see those small dots here? These indicate empty cell. Something was attempted to be entered and perhaps deleted. So we do not want to see those empty cells with dots because they indicate an empty value which is valid. We want to see cells like these which actually are empty. So we want to remove those 10 rows here with empty values. Right click, clear. Now we should not have missing values anymore in our analysis. So it's a good practice when you enter the data, and sometimes the sample size could be quite large, to go at the end and see if there are any empty cells which will be represented as missing values. Let's repeat our analysis. To repeat our analysis, I can go to Analyze, Descriptives and Frequencies, or you see here this button with the green arrow pointing downward. Here SPSS remembers our last operation. So our last operation was frequencies. And these are from my previous research. So our last operation was frequencies, and it's a shortcut menu to the most recent operations. I'm going to click frequencies. SPSS remembers all the selections from the previous tests while the file is open. So if we click charts, there is no need to request it again. I see that the pie chart is clicked, percentage is clicked. I'm simply just going to run the test again. Okay, now we see that in our sample we have 30 valid observations. There are no missing values, and again, missing values were cells which, as if there was value in them, but they were empty cells. Something was attempted to be entered in Excel, but it was deleted afterwards. We want to make sure that there are no missing values. Sometimes, however, we might have missing values, but it's a different story. I'll talk about it in another video. Right now, from our 30 observations, we see that 15 are male, 15 are female. The total is 30. This is the percentage and valid percentage. And we see a pie chart with the distribution of genders. Because we entered values for 1 and 2, instead of seeing 1 and 2 here, we see the labels that 1 corresponds to male and 2 corresponds to female. If we had not entered 1 corresponding to male, 2 for female, we would see here 1 and 2, which is much less informative. So this is how we calculate proportions. If you want to calculate averages, we click on Analyze, and again this Analyze menu is available both in the output window and in the output window, and also in the data window. So I'm going to click Analyze again, Descriptives, and descriptive statistics, and then click Descriptives. This is where averages are calculated, and the small icon here suggests that it's for means, because we see mu and sigma here, which corresponds to population mean and standard deviation, suggesting that this is where means are calculated, or averages. So we click Descriptives, and familiarity with the internet. It's a synthetic scale. It can be used, can be treated as metric in marketing. Usage in hours is a metric scale, and attitude toward the internet ranging from 1 to 7 also could be treated as a metric variable. Again, strictly speaking, attitude toward the internet and familiarity with the internet are ordinal data. This is how they are called. But in marketing, and because of the way the scales were created, they can be treated and usually are treated as metric. So we want to calculate the averages for these three variables, and we have some options. Let me click those. So we can calculate the mean, the sum, standard deviation, variance, minimum, maximum, range, and variety of other courtesy, skewness, many other options. But these are enough for now. I'm not going to click anything extra. So I'm going to click OK. And these are the means here. These are the means of our three variables. For example, familiarity with the internet, we have 30 observations. This is how they range from 2 to 9. Oh, which is kind of interesting, because now we see 9, which probably indicates that it was outside the scale. And this 9 should be declared as missing. That's quite interesting. I didn't pay attention to this earlier, and in a moment we're going to fix it. And the mean is 4.87. On average, people use the internet for 6.6 hours per week, and the attitude toward the internet ranges from 3 to 7. 5.17 is the average. Now, because this 9 here, this number 9 bothers me, I would like to declare 9 as missing. Obviously, the person who entered the data, familiarity with the internet, the person who entered the data entered a 9, and they were supposed to range from 1 to 7. Now, if it was a larger data set, you want to know how many 9s you have. In this case, we can run the frequency of familiarity just to see how many 9s there are entered wrongly for this variable. So let's see. I'm going to run the frequencies, descriptive frequencies, because I do want to examine frequencies in this case for familiarity. Okay. And I see that there is only one 9. The others are okay. So here we entered for 4 somewhat familiar and for 7 very familiar. If we entered values for the other numbers, we would have verbal descriptions, but we did not do that. Now we want to get rid of this 9 here, because 9 doesn't belong. It's not a valid answer. This familiarity with the internet was supposed to range between 1 and 7. So how can we tell SPSS that this 9 is not ours? We don't need it. It's wrong. It just something was miskeyed, misentered. Well, it actually is quite very easy. We go again to the variable view. We click to familiar. There is a section here called missing. When I click it, it gives me several options how to declare missing values. Right now, by default, there is no missing values. But I know that 9 is not ours. I do not want 9 to be included into the analysis. So I'm going to click discrete missing values. And here I can enumerate up to 3. And I'm telling SPSS right now, treat 9 as a missing value. So every time SPSS sees number 9, for the variable familiarity, familiar with the internet, it is going to ignore it as if this 9 was not entered. I'm going to click OK. Now I see here that 9 now is declared as missing. If I run the averages again or frequencies, 9 will be labeled as missing. So let's see it. I'm going to repeat frequency. Okay, and now we see that missing 9 is declared as a missing value, which will be excluded from our analysis. I still want to repeat the analysis. I still want to repeat the calculations for averages. So I'm going to descriptive statistics, descriptives, and again this menu here calculates the averages for the variables in our sample. When I click descriptives, everything is remembered from last time. No need to change anything. I just click OK. And let's see what we have. This is our last input. See what happened. SPSS. Now for familiarity with the internet, we have 29 valid observations because 9 is declared as missing. It was excluded from our analysis. Now the minimum is 2 and the maximum is 7. 9 is not included in our analysis. And these are the real means of our data. So this is how this concludes the tutorial. And in this tutorial we covered how to enter data into SPSS and do basic statistical analysis like calculating the averages and the proportions of the variables in the sample.